It's Play Saves the World, Episode 6, Human Flourishing in the Digital Space, with special guest, Dr. Rachel Kowert. Hello and welcome, everybody, to Play Saves the World, an ongoing conversation on the meaning of play for human flourishing. My name is Daniel Hilty.
My name is Kevin Taylor.
And I am Dr. Rachel Kowert.
Yay.
Yay. Dr. Rachel Kowert, welcome so much to Play Saves the World. We're so glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Kowert, or Rachel, is joining us today to talk about the digital space and video games, online communities, digital games. Rachel, we were saying before we started recording, I think you first came to our attention and we noticed you through your Psychgeist YouTube channel, which is an excellent channel. And it is just a great repository on various conversations and research on the intersection of psychology and pop culture and digital games, and so grateful to have you joining us for this little foray into digital games, digital space, and how they intersect with human flourishing in life. So anyway, so recommend that channel, Psychgeist. It's Psychgeist. No.
Psy. Oh, yeah, Chgeist. Oh, I don't even know my own channel.
I
understand.
Name. I understand. Yeah, it's good. So well, if you don't mind, please just if maybe this is the first time for some of our listeners to hear about you, would you mind just telling us a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Dr. Rachel Kowert. I am a research psychologist. I have been studying the uses and effects of games for 15 years, mostly focusing on the links between games and mental health, and also some issues around games and trust and safety. I have a YouTube channel, which I'm glad at least one person watches. That makes me feel good. Called Psychologist, as you mentioned, but it's also grown into more of a multimedia content production studio that has videos on YouTube, but also a book series and a newsletter and those sorts of things, all about the intersection of science and games.
Great. I didn't. I just recently saw that. Yeah, you've expanded into like even some publications and books, right? I was watching your double header video on Psychgeist publications on the Umbrella Academy and Bluey.
Yes, there's a book series. It's called The Zeitgeist of Pop Culture, and we celebrate icons in pop culture, and we take a little psychological deep dive into them. The Witcher was the first one because it's my first love, but we also have Mandalorian, Umbrella Academy, and Bluey, but it's a 20-book series from Play Story Press, so there's a bunch more in the pipeline.
Wow, that's great.
It's cool.
And these are from a variety of authors and researchers and who contribute to all of these. And
correct. Like, I'm the series editor, so I make the decision on the editors and the topics, and then the editors kind of run with their own topic. I call them love letters to our favorite fandoms.
Okay.
And so we find people who really resonate with The Mandalorian, and they take the helm with that one and the other topics.
Is there any available kind of hint or preview at upcoming subjects, or is that under wraps?
I can hint and preview. I also should say all the PDFs are free. What I love about Play Story Press is all the content and all the books is freely available. The paperbacks are beautiful. Highly recommend, but you can see them all for free. Yes, the next one to come out is Stranger Things.
Oh, yeah.
Which would be a good one. And then the Zeitgeist of Taylor Swift is also
Nice.
Yeah, it's a good one.
That's great. Just before coming home to the studio, which is home, I was having a conversation with a pastor friend who was all excited because they just got Taylor Swift tickets. So it was an exciting day for this pastor friend of mine. Yeah.
Oh, yes, for sure.
So thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, we've first got to know you, especially around the subject of digital games, and I know you've done a lot of research and speaking on that. Would you mind sharing? So, what's been your story with digital games? How did you get into this as a part of your life?
It's a classic story of I had an older brother who liked video games, and it was what we did together growing up. It was the thing we both enjoyed. So I spent my whole life, still now, present day, playing and enjoying games as a leisure activity. But it didn't become a career until I went to graduate school and I trained to become a therapist. And I was seeing clients in the practice of becoming a therapist, and I was hearing a lot of concerns in and around games. And there wasn't any research at the time to inform these parents, like, should they be concerned? Should they not? Other clinicians were asking, hey, I know you play games, like, should we be concerned? I was like, I don't know. There's no research in this space. And that's when I pivoted into a research-based career, looking at the uses and effects of games.
Okay. So you really kind of had to at least maybe invent, maybe not from whole cloth, but at least kind of, this was some kind of pioneering work into trying to figure out the psychological impact of games on who we are. And like you're saying, not a lot out there when you were beginning.
No, there were 2 papers out of Stanford from Nikki and Constance Steinkuhler and Dimitri Williams. They were the only ones doing it. And I remember when I applied for my PhD, you have to do an interview about your topic, and I kept saying, like, we need to learn all this stuff about games. And the people in the committee were like, I don't know, like, is this interesting? Is this important? And like, they weren't convinced. Whereas today, in 2024, it's a massive field in academia. It's interdisciplinary. Hundreds of people, if not thousands, are studying it. Yeah, but at the time, it was quite new.
Yeah, and I've got teenage boys, and it's very much, I was thinking how it's the world they swim in. It's the way they hang out with their friends. It's always going to include some sort of video gaming because the devices are even more prevalent, I think, than when you were growing up, or certainly when I was growing up.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Because when I started studying games, it was still very much a conversation of your online life and your offline life. And they were separate entities with separate groups of friends and separate people. And that is absolutely not the case anymore.
Mm-hmm. So the people you might spend your days with in person are also the days you're spending your time with online as well.
Yes, and then the people you meet online might be people you then bring into other offline spaces. Like, there are innumerable stories of people finding their spouses playing online games and those sorts of things.
Really? Interesting. Interesting.
It's almost
online dating.
through games. Wow.
Yeah.
It almost reminds me what they said, I read recently, that when ATM started, they thought it would replace local banks. They thought it would just, you just wouldn't have it anymore. But the truth is, it kind of enabled them to stay open because you needed fewer people. So you had the ATM for cash withdrawals, but you still need to go in that space. So it's like the ATM is coexisting with the physical need to, I don't know, have a question, open an account or something that you need a person for. That, like they can cohabitate quite well.
Absolutely. When I started into this work, the concern was a lot around displacement. The same thing you're saying, Kevin. Like, online interactions in games are going to displace, they're going to replace our traditional interactions, and that's a bad thing, and we should be worried, and blah, 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 blah. That was kind of it. But what we find in the research and what we know very clearly now is that it augments. It's not displacing, it's not fully replacing. It exists, it coexists.
Right.
So it sounds like it was kind of a hard sell at first when you were trying to propose this subject. How did you finally get it approved? Yeah, I mean, what was there a trick for getting this?
Yeah. You know what? I remember the exact moment, actually. So I was on the interview. The interview was an hour, and I kept saying, it's important. And at the end of the interview, one of the people on the panel said, you keep saying it's important, but who is it important for? Who are you getting this information for? Who needs this information? And I said, the clinicians need it. And I said it without hesitating, but that's the space I was in. I was training to become a clinician. And there was a pause, and they said, good answer. And then I got a spot in the program.
Okay,
So I guess
okay.
that convinced them.
Interesting. Okay, good. Glad you thought of clinicians.
Me too. I mean, clinicians, they're the backbone of us all.
Yeah.
And what was your first video game love? Like, what was the one that, because for board gamers, we often talk about the first game that kind of showed us modern board gaming. So what would you call that for you?
Good question. Oh, it's so hard. I'm going to have to go. Final Fantasy VI is really sticks with me. It's you have a cast of characters. It's an open fantasy world. You save the world. You work together. That one was really hit me in all the right places, I think, because it was the first game I played where I felt I was like important to the story and like important in saving the world. And there were female characters in that game that were really strong, powerful leaders. There's like a general in an army. There was, a mage who could hold her own and wasn't reliant on anyone else to kind of like hold her hand through it. And that was a really kind of powerful experience for me. And I think it also hit at the right age, like 11, 12, somewhere in there.
That's lovely. Yeah. For me, and I'm not a big video gamer, and I feel just older a little bit because they've changed so much. But I loved Halo.
Yes.
The first
Halo's
Halo,
a good one.
because it had such a narrative arc, and I had no idea that all of a sudden you'd be dealing with these zombie characters. Like, it goes from you fighting the bad guys to there's another bad guy. And I was just like, whoa, I didn't know you could do that. You could tell a story like that. So that was great. But now, modern board games, there's so much of choosing your clothes and
Digital
buying.
games?
There's always stores where
Video
you buy
games.
stuff.
Yeah.
Video games. Yeah. I just feel kind of lost. It's so different from my experience for what
I
what I
think that
want.
the industry's changed so much, right? For what
Sure.
you want. You just have to find what you want. What you want
Sure.
is still in there. I would say as I've gotten older and have less time to commit to, Final Fantasy games are 100 plus hours. I love them, but I don't have that time anymore. I've really wandered into the world of indie games. And, there's a lot of those to explore that they don't have the money to develop that much customization or storefronts even to begin with in their games. And you can kind of play the closed loop in a couple of hours. I'd say there's still games for you, Kevin.
Sure.
There's still
Oh, I
games for
know.
you.
I know. It's just when I occasionally dabble with it, it seems so
Yes.
different. I'm like,
Yeah.
I want to play this game. Why am I picking out clothes? It just it feels like another culture. It's like going to Italy and you're like, well, you eat this for breakfast? It's so weird. Like, it's very
Right.
different culture. But
Definitely changed.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's interesting hearing, some repeated themes in what you're talking about, Rachel, and in what we've encountered in other subjects and other episodes of Play It before. This sense that it so often feels like when we or whoever is trying to talk about the value of something that is perceived as playful in life or in the world, how much that's so often a hard sell to larger society and to folks. This is not considered serious work or important when in fact it often kind of touches upon some of the most important things about how we interact with each other and what it means to be human. And as you said, giving you this sense of importance and value, and that's something we've heard in other aspects of play as well. This ability to give a person a sense of self-worth and agency when it seems like there aren't a lot of other places in the world where that person can get that.
Yeah, absolutely. We're so quick to discredit the value of play in adulthood. It's almost like second nature. It's like, what?
Yeah.
Play for non-children? That's
Right.
ridiculous.
Yeah. So, so you suggest this research topic. You mentioned clinicians. It gets approved. You enter into this world of researching the influence of digital games. So, could you tell us a little bit about that? Then, what did you find out? How can? Well, I guess maybe start with the. Well, yeah, just start there. What did you find out? What were some of the biggest surprises about the influence of digital games as you were first getting into it, and how have you found ways that it is a positive influence on people, on societies. And we can get into some of the maybe the concerns the folks have as well. But what did you discover?
Well, your PhD, first I discovered your PhD is a really niche topic because I came in, very like, I'm going to find out how games impact us in all areas of our life. And they were like, no, you're not. You have 4 years. Pick something smaller. So my PhD research was looking at the way that online communication in games impacts our ability to communicate offline. Because a lot of parents' concerns was my kids are going to lose their ability to socialize because they're only socializing through text online with people they quote unquote don't know. And I will be honest, when I started, I really thought that's what I would find. That there was some kind of social differences between people who were attracted to online games and people who weren't, because the veracity of the concern from the parents was convincing. As someone who played games their whole life, I was like, I feel like I have social skills. Like, am I going to now not have them because I'm playing all these games? But turns out that's not the case. I guess I should have known, but that's why you do research.
Yeah.
And there aren't any social differences between people who play a lot of online games and people who don't. They don't have less friends. They don't rate themselves as less socially skilled. The only thing that came across in the 4 years of research I did in that project was that people who play online games rated higher on a measure of what can be construed as shyness. Now, that doesn't mean the games make them more shy. Okay. It much more likely means people who maybe feel a little social hesitancy are more likely to seek some social communication online. Is that inherently bad? Of course not. They can be making friends. They could be learning new skills. They can be gaining confidence in the ability of the skills they already have. Yada, yada.
Could be an accommodation to what they need. Yeah, sure.
There you go, an accommodation. Yeah. And so I think that actually was surprising for me because I did go in thinking I was gonna find the other way around. And a lot of people, parents, clinicians, were also surprised that we didn't see any of these disparities one way or the other between people who play games and people who don't.
That reminds me of something I told Daniel we probably could just cut out, and then now I want to bring it up after saying that because everyone's a little bit of a hypocrite. But it just reminds me of that moral panic. Like there's often this moral panic around things, and it came up with D&D. Video games are not satanic, but there is a moral panic that ensues. That parents are rightfully something they don't know. There's something that's new. They're worried about their kids, but then it's interesting we freak out so quickly.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up moral panic. It is my second most viewed video on my YouTube channel. Moral panic is interesting because it's cyclical and it just has to find something. We all want a simple solution to a complex problem. So, I think the youth are going a little wild. It must be this new D&D thing I heard of. I think that I'm hearing on the news more crimes are happening. It must be video games because, that's the thing. And you're right. I don't blame anyone for having those assumptions in that we want to understand what's happening with our kids. And if we don't understand the technology, it's easy to be like, well, it might be this new thing I don't know anything about. What kind of impact is that having? That seems natural and normal. But the moral panic about games has lasted literally 50 years. It's really the most enduring moral panic of our time. And I find it what's the word? Not irritating. I find it to be like the fly on my shoulder because we have so much research now that debunks a lot of the things that are driving the panic. We know it's not related to violence. We know that it's not related to peer delinquency. Like we know all these things, but still that panic is in and around video games is just being like a gross negative influence on all aspects of youth.
Why do you think it's so persistent, this moral
theory.
panic? Okay, I want to hear about it. Yeah, good.
My unproven but educated hypothesis is that a new technology hasn't come yet to overcome it. So when VR becomes cheaper and more ubiquitous, they're going to say, oh, those 2D games, that's not a problem at all. We've moved on. Now it's the fully immersive.
They were good. They were good. They were good. They'll be nostalgic.
I'm writing a thing on moral panic right now. And in the mid 1700s, there was a big moral panic around novels. And like novels are not a valuable writing genre. They should be reading history. Novels are going to make women run away with unsuitable suitors, like all of this stuff. And then literally 40 years later, they're talking about like, I wish people were reading novels. Now they're listening to the radio. And, my God. 40 years, more than 40 years. But you know what I mean.
I'm sure it's legendary, but there's probably even no way to document this at all. But I remember hearing a story a long time ago about just imagining this situation where the development of writing and
Yes.
and someone starts, and this idea of I can put my thoughts down on parchment or whatever. And just and this pushback to it, like, well, you're obviously going to get dumber because you can't hold it in your head anymore, and you're going to forget
Yes.
things. Your
Plato
memory's
actually
gonna,
says that.
I was going to say it was
Yeah,
Plato.
Was it Plato?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
I'm in the presence of too much smarter people than I. But yeah, that's so cool. So I didn't just imagine that. Plato said that.
Plato
Yes,
says that.
exactly.
Okay.
So
Interesting,
games are just the latest
interesting.
in a long line of these. And actually, I would say games still do sustain because like VR hasn't taken over, but we're seeing the same moral panic around the amorphous screens, screen time,
Right.
smartphones, social media. Not to say they don't have the potential to harm specific users, but there's no research to show that they themselves, in and of themselves, are harmful. And that's what the problem with the moral panic
Sure.
is.
Sure. I do worry sometimes that the limitless nature of these modern forms of attention seduction, whatever you want to call it, it's so much more potent. Like a novel, I guess you could reread it, or a newspaper you could grab in Victorian times and read it, but eventually you stop. But the endless nature of your Netflix queue, I guess eventually you get tired, but the 24-hour news cycle, those sorts of things are kind of inhuman in a sense. Like we need rest, we need to be away because we can't function like that, but we're very tempted to do that because
Because we're human. We're tempted because we are human also, and we as humans seek novelty.
Yes.
It's a core drive. And there, I had in my PhD at York, there was a professor there who studied visual processing, and she told me once that why humans never tire of looking at fire or fireworks is because your visual cortex never acclimates to the stimulation. So if I tapped you on the shoulder for a bunch of times in the exact same spot, eventually you kind of wouldn't feel it anymore because it acclimates to that feeling, but your visual cortex never does. And so when you have the endless scrolling that's constantly changing, right, your brain and your body, like, they want that. So I don't know if it's inhuman. I think it's the most human. Is it necessarily good? That's a different conversation.
Yes.
We drive for that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I guess I was struck partly today. I went to the YMCA, and in the locker room, there's CNBC blaring. And it's just, I thought, because we don't have cable TV, it's such a weird idea that there should be a TV on something all the time. And there's like, stay tuned. I'm like, I don't want to stay tuned. I don't want to see this commercial, right?
I
Like,
want a break.
I just want to change and get on with my life. Yeah, like, what's wrong with a little quiet? But maybe I'm just, grumpy old man.
I like a little quiet too.
Yeah.
I think, to each their own, and also in different phases of our life, I think we want different things.
Oh, that's a good point. That's right. Yeah, that's fair. Interesting.
This conversation reminds me of something I heard you say, Rachel, about, these weren't your words, but the idea of kind of blaming the misuse of media as a way to kind of ignore or cover up kind of deeper causes for, I don't know, maladaptive behavior is the right word, or just unhealthiness, or, and separating this idea of kind of separating media from separating the use of a media, or the reason that we're using a media, from the inherent value or not of that media itself. Kind of, does that kind of get at some of the things that you've looked at, or?
Definitely. And I think this goes back to the moral panic idea. So, for instance, video game addiction. Addiction is a very common term that we hear in the context of video games. The research shows that games are not inherently addicting, or there hasn't been any research to demonstrate that they are. And the research very clearly points to that. People can use games in problematic ways, but what's driving that behavior is always something else. Underlying depression, underlying anxiety. They're using it to help manage moods, but now it's become kind of a maladaptive coping strategy. And that is actually a very important distinction, talking about clinicians. How are you going to address the problem? you have to address the anxiety or you have to address the depression. You don't take the games away as if the games are the source of the problem. That could be the coping strategy that's helping
right.
them hold on
Right.
at this point. And I think that it's really important that we don't fall into moral panic and be like, oh, it's this one thing, instead of looking deeper at the more complicated problem, the more difficult problem, but it's actually the source of what we're seeing externally as quote unquote game addiction, but really it's, a coping strategy for something else.
Yeah. I know you've had a lot of folks in, I've seen on your channel interviews from news stations and others wanting to talk to you about the moral panic, it maybe not so many words, around digital games. Have you found a way of talking about it that you think can help kind of effectively address some of that, or lower the temperature on that kind of concern that people have? Is it just talking about the research, or is what helps with that?
Yeah, I haven't quite found the magic formula. I think that talking about the research tends to be my default, because as someone who went into the field originally skeptical and expecting to find things and didn't, it was the research that really moved me to rethink the way that we think about games. So I talk about the research. Generally, if you look across the board, we've been studying games for 50, almost 60 years, and the effects are overall more positive than negative. That's usually the anchor where I start. And then they say, is it okay that my child plays Fortnite? Like, at the end of the day, they actually just want to know about their one specific child's case. They don't actually want to know about kind of the global effects. And yes, it's okay probably that your kid plays Fortnite. Is he playing with strangers? But but I find that anchoring the research is a good place to start. And also just to validate, like, I understand that you want a simple solution to life's complexities. We all want a simple solution, but life isn't that simple.
Right. Well said. Well said. Yeah, there's this temptation to kind of fundamentalism, whether it's religious or not, that would give very simple, these are the fundamental things that will separate the wheat from the chaff. But life isn't like that. Yeah.
No. And you can just remember, Plato didn't want us to write things down. And look, we love writing things down now.
Right. That's right.
I don't know. I'm still suspicious. That's why I...
Never write anything down.
That's right. Nothing.
That's right. It's hopefully the IRS never figures that out.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, exactly.
Thankfully, the IRS is not among our listeners.
So discuss, Rachel, what the benefits of digital games are. I know it's a big...
So many.
Question. Yes.
It's a big
give
question.
Give us some good ones.
Good ones. Mood management is a really great one. It can take us from bored to less bored. It can help us go from frustrated to more calm. Like, there's a lot of research that shows that playful activities, digital games included, could also be board games, could also be playing a sport outside, help us manage our moods. Games are really good at creative thinking. A lot of times there's puzzles in games and you have to think of creative ways in order to solve them. And there's not usually just one way to solve them. Sometimes there's multiple ways to solve them, and you have to figure that out. I think that Animal Crossing is a good example I like to give. At the beginning of the pandemic, we played a lot of Animal Crossing.
Yep.
And I swear to you, it taught my kids how to read, because there's no voice acting and you have to figure out what those words are on the screen. And so in addition to creativity and creative thinking and mood management and happiness and playing together and socializing, they were also learning how to read, which is pretty cool.
Creative thinking, mood management. Yeah, those are great. I like that.
There's a lot. I mean, leadership skills. We talk about online games, right? I was studying online players and their social skills. You can learn social skills from socializing with others, but also from observing others in the environment. And then just a lot of cognitive flexibility, thinking in the moment. World of Warcraft is kind of where I was raised. So if I think of, you're fighting a monster and he has lava comes out of his mouth and you have to move, but you have to think about the other people and where are they? Like, you're doing a lot of mental flexibility and just figuring out how to make it through the next 10 minutes of this battle. And that's just, one of the many things you're doing in those kinds of spaces.
I know in the world of board games, you often hear it said that a good quality for a game is you have the moment in it and you think, I was really clever there. That was, and
Yeah.
those little bits that help you to feel, I figured this out. I'm a clever person. Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and most board games coming out now are trying to zone in on that so that even if you didn't win, you feel like you did something. You had this, you built something. You feel productive and you don't feel dumb. Whereas Monopoly makes you feel dumb because someone takes all your stuff because you landed on the wrong space. So that's where games have gotten so much better.
You are board game experts. Let me tell you, the game of life was one of my favorite games growing up. I never owned it, so I have a lot of good memories of playing at other people's houses. So my 9-year-old wanted to play it, and I was like, absolutely, we're going to buy this game and play it. It was my favorite game. They have changed it. And now that game did not make me feel like I achieved anything.
Really?
Yeah. I'm going to leave you with homework, which is to replay the modern game of life, because I felt like there was no challenge. I didn't feel clever. I felt like my car filled up real fast. They give you pets now, and they count as pegs in your car.
Really?
And then your car's full of pets, and then there's no room for people in your car.
Where did all these cats come from?
I know. Yeah,
You really are a
exactly.
dog parent.
Yeah, yes. Because you can't be a parent to anyone else because all your seats are full.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Actually, one of our future episodes, we're talking about a book that details the history of several board games, including the Game of Life and how it's
Lovely.
changed. It's
I
interesting.
look forward to that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kevin.
And video games, again, I'm struck with how it's such a great way to socialize. So my teenage boys, anytime they have some friends over and there's a bunch of them, they want to play Smash Brothers. And they have the best time. But after about 30, 40 minutes, they'll go outside and play basketball too.
Yep.
So they're not playing it the whole time. It gets a little old. They never play it on their own. But when people come over, they just have a grand time. Just getting all these crazy powers and smacking each other around and laughing.
Yeah. You
Yeah,
know,
I just love that.
It's fun to experience something outside, the mundane. That's what they call play, right? Experiencing something outside the mundane. And the other thing about games, board games, I would argue as well, and video games, the reason they're so compelling and the reason they're so fun is because they hit those 3 buckets of motivation, human motivation. At the end of the day, you can draw down all human action into 3 motivational tracks: the desire to feel autonomous, free to make choices, the desire to feel achieving, that you've achieved something, you did something clever, and the desire to feel related to other people, either actual other people or the characters in the game. And that's under this umbrella. It's called self-determination theory. And the argument goes that all things we do as humans ever in our life are motivated by one or all of those 3 things. And games do all 3 really, really well. Really well-designed games do all 3. And that's why, I'll happily spend 150 hours in a Final Fantasy game because it's hitting all those buckets and it's feeling very satisfying to me. Or Smash Brothers, they'll do that for 30 minutes. But, they're also getting those same buckets hit when they go outside and they play basketball.
Right.
I like that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's not tempting them to stay inside all the time because eventually they're like, let's go do something else. But it's as a kid, I would have loved to have that way to play with friends.
Yeah.
So I remember Pong and that kind of stuff, but that was 1, 2 people. It was not nearly as exciting. Not nearly as autonomous.
Yeah. It wasn't a round of Fortnite, which is when all the kids are playing now.
Yeah. Yeah.
In terms of connection, if I could share one story too from our family,
Yes.
I need to give credit where it's due to my wife Kristen on this. But so both of our kids are adults, are out of the house and have moved away to college and jobs and things like that. But they grew up playing Minecraft, right here in the family, and after they left, Kristen said, "You know what? I'm gonna learn to play Minecraft, so I can connect with our kids." And by golly, so our son is a programmer and kind of set up our own server, things like that. And it took me a while, but I eventually kind of got into it too. And now they're roommates, and so now there are these really fun nights when we even though we live in different places, the whole family gets together and just does Minecraft together, and then some of their friends too, and it's delightful. It's so cool.
It's the best.
I'm horrible
It's the
at it,
best.
but it's really good. Yeah.
But
yeah.
you know what's so good is because you're playing together. It's
Right,
not that
right.
you're just hanging out together. It's not that you're just on a phone call together. You're doing something fun and playful together, and that's really magical in terms of like the social connection that's
awesome.
happening there.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
And like board games, ultimately the stakes are low. If you're terrible at
Yes.
Minecraft, it really doesn't mean much of anything. Like it's still fun. In a board game, you're like, hopefully you have the perspective, it's just a game. And then
Yeah,
of course
yeah.
people can go down a different path and get, put their ego too much in the stakes. But hopefully,
Totally.
hopefully you're just like, it's just Minecraft and I'm bad at it. Let's play again. Right? Who cares?
Oh my gosh,
This is fun.
I'm awful at Minecraft, and my kids love it.
Yeah,
I fall
right.
off cliffs. I run into
Exactly.
creepers. Oh, that's the best for them.
Yeah. And you'll play again. Yeah, it's fun.
Sure, why not?
Why
Yeah.
not?
They have all modded their Minecraft in some way that they can teleport. I cannot do this, and so most of my playing involves me getting into some horrible situation and just saying over the Discord,
Help!
"Could someone please come teleport me, get me out of this lava pit or whatever?" And
That's
say,
awesome.
"Okay, Dad." And then,
Yeah.
Dad's in the
yeah.
cave again. Help.
Yeah.
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 That's so fun.
Yeah, it
That's
is.
great.
So freedom, achievement, and connection. I guess those were kind of my words that I put in. But you said the
Yes.
three. What was that overall theory called? Of
It's called self-determination theory.
I love that.
Yeah.
SDT.
Oh, it's great. And there's SDT. That's it.
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
there's articles specifically framing the SDT framework on top of video games and showing how those two map on.
All right, that's great. So we talked about the moral panic and around video games, and really how that's just not what the research bears out. Are there any? Do you have any concerns that are unique to the digital world, or not?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Nothing is all good or
Yeah.
all bad, and there's definitely concerns. People use games problematically? Absolutely. We talk a lot about escapism, for instance. Like, I think it's great to escape into a book or escape into a Netflix series or escape into a video game. But if you're escaping for distraction, that's one thing. If you're escaping for avoidance, that might not be as good for you to be doing. So there's definitely concerns around those kinds of things, problematic use. There's concerns about online harms. That's kind of where my work is these days. I have a lot of concerns about online harms, especially in game spaces, because they tend to be less regulated and less moderated than traditional social media. They tend to be excluded from those conversations around regulation. So I have a lot of concerns around that. So like when parents say, can my kids play Fortnite, right? My answer is usually, are they playing with strangers? Honestly, that's usually where I go, because I'm far more concerned about the social harms that could be happening in this space than the harms of the technology or the content of the game itself.
The harm inflicted
By
by
that, you
another
mean-
human player.
Right. Yeah.
And by that you mean threats, bullying, that kind of
Yep.
behavior. Okay.
All of that kind of stuff. Yep. Exposure to hate speech, normalized misogyny. Like, there's lots of things to kind of
Yeah.
discuss in there.
Right. What would you say the criticism, the attention merchants type criticism that these games are really pulling us in and taking away our attention from things that we maybe aren't aware of?
It's a good question. I would say, as a good academic, I would say that's not my area of expertise. I would say there's a lot of conversation about that, specifically related to what are called dark patterns or dark design. Dr. Celia Hodent is really kind of the expert in this space. But the things that are going into games that don't put the player first, so like microtransactions or loot boxes or those sorts of things, I think that's worthy of a discussion in and of itself. Like, is that really the best design we could be having to help our players flourish, in these spaces? Or is that more not player centered in terms of the choices that you're making and how you're designing these spaces? But for attention economy, there's other experts for that.
Gotcha.
I'm not as well versed in that.
Yeah.
I like that idea of how you phrase it about putting the player first. Yeah, I mean, if that's not if that's
It's not
the
putting them
motivation-
first. Is it really what we should be doing?
Right.
Right. And the threat is always with corporatization of things that it can they were not going to put the player first because it is their goal is to make money, which is fine, and that's how it works. But it can become, I don't know, predatory. And board games have been
Right.
People are asking these questions as well. There's this whole, wanting to kickstart a game and adding on all this stuff and basically paying up front for a game you've not played and ended up getting excited, and then a year and a half later you've got $700 in a game you don't like, and you're like, what? How did that happen? So,
Right. Yeah.
Are there any digital games that you would recommend to newbies, like newbies to the
Newbies.
world of digital gaming, like maybe Kevin and me? Well, we know a little bit about it. I know there are things.
You know a little bit.
There's something called Minecraft.
There's something called Minecraft. I love Minecraft. I don't know if I'd recommend that for new players, and I think that that's because I'm biased that I have very bad visual spatial skills. And so I find Minecraft very difficult, actually, to navigate effectively. I would say like a Mario Kart. Everyone can do a Mario Kart, and one button to go, one button to shoot a shell. It's pretty simple. Although a new game came out recently called Astrobot, which is incredibly fun platform game, which also has very simple mechanics. It's very colorful and bright and shiny, and that one's been pretty fantastic.
Astrobot.
Yes, it's
what
very
platform
fun.
is that?
PlayStation.
PlayStation.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's really fun. Highly recommend.
I like it.
Very
Thank
cool.
you.
Is it time?
Well, we're approaching kind of our end of the show.
I want to play the game.
Do you want to play the?
I want to play the game.
Okay. All right. Before we get to our closing game, anything else that you wish we had talked about or asked about that we haven't talked about? I'm sure there's so much more we could talk about. But.
There's a lot to talk about, but I think we covered the bases. I think it's important to understand that just games are tools. Games are one piece of media, just like any other thing, and they may have been subject to the moral panic for many decades. But I hope that for people who are listening, they'll give them a try and they'll give them a shot. They're really fun, and they can be a great way to connect with your family and just, manage your moods.
Yeah. Great. Thanks.
That's cool.
And before the closing game, in case people don't want to listen to the closing game, how can people find you?
How can they find me? You can find me on YouTube at Psychgeist. I also have a website. It's rkowert.com. And on that website, you can find all the ways to find me.
Great.
Yeah, I just Googled your name and got to the
There
website.
I am.
Yep.
There's my face.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, please. Check out the website and the channel if you haven't
Yeah.
already. We recommend it.
I say that, Kevin, because I showed that to my children once. I Googled my name, and a bunch of pictures of my face come up because I'm on the internet. And my kids thought they're like, oh my God, are you famous? Why is your picture here? And so I use it to impress my children.
It's funny.
It's a good use of it. Yeah.
It is.
Well, so Rachel's been kind enough to agree
Or
to end
box.
with a game. Yes, game
Or box.
box. We've been trying to perfect the simultaneous chant over the internet. It hasn't quite worked out yet, but the Zoom challenge. So this is something that Kevin and I have been working on. Kevin and I have done this a couple times just ourselves, but it hasn't been published yet. This might be our first published example of it.
Oh, it is. I hadn't thought of that.
So Rachel was kind enough to agree to this. It's a little game we're calling Game or Box. And here's the thing. One of us tries to pitch a beloved board game to that person, to the other person, and talks about the virtues of this game, why we think the other person would like it. And then at the end of it, at the end of the pitch, we also talk about a mystery box, which will also be revealed, and give some clues as to what is in what's the contents of the mystery box. The person that is being pitched to then has to decide between the game or the contents of the mystery box. If they choose the game will be delivered to them by Place Saves the World Carrier Pigeon, which
Doesn't really exist.
Which does not really exist. So sorry, Rachel. All of these awards are just
all fictional.
Are just metaphorical.
Actually, there is one you get, which is a T-shirt, but that one.
That's right.
is real.
We are going to give you a T-shirt. Yeah. Or they can choose the contents of the box. If they choose the contents of the box, that will be delivered by Place Saves the World carrier pigeon. Or they can shoot the moon and try to guess the contents of the box. If they guess correctly the contents of the box, they get both items delivered by carrier pigeon. If they guess incorrectly, they get neither. Pitch you a game. And all right. So here we go. The game I want to pitch is the only game that I'm aware of in my collection that was inspired by a video game. So that's why I thought it'd be especially appropriate for today. Are you familiar with Dorf Romantic?
I'm not, but I'm already pretty convinced by the name alone.
So we first got to know Dorf Romantic as a video game on the Nintendo Switch.
Oh, so you had played it before. Wow.
We did, as a video game. It's a very peaceful tile-laying game. It's a video game that looks like a board game. Kind of very like Catan-like, where you're taking these little tiles, and some of them have railroad tracks on them, and some of them have, fields and forests on them, and sheep. And you take turn. Well, in the video game, it's just one person. You have to match sides, and you grow this village with different terrain types, and then you get rewards based on certain goals, like having 5 field tiles connected or 12 forest tiles connected, or things like that. Really a lovely, almost kind of meditative video game, Dorf Romantic, out of Germany. So then it was so board game-like, they decided to make an actual board game based on it. And this is a game that is cooperative. It's tile-laying. It's unlike most other cooperative games. It's very, very peaceful. My wife Kristen and I enjoy doing it in the evening, and we just make this growing map of a village out in front of us. It's also a campaign game, which means that you add new elements each time you play it, based on how much you've achieved in your previous game. So it feels different from game to game. It came out in 2022, and super board game nerdy here. In 2023, it won the annual Spiel des Jahres award, which is like the big game of the year award in the board game community. So that's my pitch for a board game.
Pitch.
To you. So Dorf Romantic, the board game.
Name.
Or the contents of the Play Saves the World mystery box. Right there. So
like a mystery box.
Here are some clues, and then you can decide if you want one or the other. We always try to tie it into the theme of the board game. So how it's tied into the theme this time is half of the name of what's in this box is also German. That's clue number 1. The name of it, half of it is German, like the Dorf Romantic. Okay, here we go. Clue number 2, the other half of the name is Spanish. First half is German.
What?
Second half is Spanish. Clue number 3, it is, and this might just kind of give it away. Maybe not give it away. I don't know. A chocolate hazelnut confection treat that you can find in grocery stores.
That's half Spanish and half German.
Half German.
It's the chocolate treat.
It's a chocolate treat, half German, half Spanish is the name. Not to add to the confusion of all, it's actually made by an Italian company.
What?
Our world is very disturbing.
We live in a
my
strange world.
gosh.
So those are the 3 clues. So either you can choose to have this without guessing what it is, and you'd get it by carrier pigeon.
I cannot guess it.
Okay. Or the video game.
Can we discuss maybe?
Yeah, we can totally
is it
guess.
something like Aldi has German? What's some of those German candies that have come over? The little Kinder something? Kinder
Just
chocolate?
Kinders,
I don't
those
know.
like Kinder
Spanish.
Surprise, Kinder Egg.
Have you
there's not a
heard of a
Spanish
Kinder
one.
kind of game with candy with a Spanish word after it?
No.
Kinder salsa.
Kinder salsa.
That sounds so
It's so
appealing.
good.
Made
It's
by
so good.
Italians. Yeah, I used to live in Germany,
Did you really?
Now I'm going. I did
Where-
my postdoc in Germany, in
May I ask
Münster.
whereabouts? Oh, Munster.
Munster in the north. Oh my God. Well, look, it might have a German name, but the German name isn't Dorf. So I feel like the game wins.
You're going to get the game.
Game
Yay!
and Bucks.
I think that was a good choice.
I think the game wins. Yeah.
That's what I would have
Yay.
picked as well. So, yay.
I want to know what's in the box.
We're going to get a really strong carrier pigeon to bring that to you. So, yeah.
Yeah.
In the box is you ready? Here we go. I got to see if I can do it on camera here. In the box is little mini Kinder Buenos. Kinder
Buenos.
Oh,
I know Kinder Buenos.
So
I was right about the Aldi Kinder thing.
You were.
Kinder Bueno, German,
Right,
Spanish,
Kinder
made by an
Bueno.
Italian company, Ferrero. This is a year's
They're
supply if you eat one every 26 days. So,
Great.
yeah, so there you
I
go.
didn't know that was an Italian company. That's wild.
I didn't either.
that's
We
weird.
just discovered these just like in the last week. But I've been eating more than one every
They're
26
delicious.
days. They're really
Kinder
good.
Buenos are very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well played, Rachel. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good job. Good job.
Yay.
Yay.
Let us know when your carrier pigeon arrives with the
I
with the
will.
game.
I will.
Please send them back.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, he will come back. That's what he does, or she,
I
or it.
forgot.
Yeah.
I forgot. Yeah.
No, it's is way too complicated. We need to train it from Rachel's place. That's how
That's
it-
the
I
trick.
could release
I'm
it here.
far.
Rachel's pigeon.
Yes, that's right.
Yes.
Where
Yes.
are you? Where do you live?
Canada. So
You are Canada,
I hope
okay.
that pigeon's prepared.
We train our pigeons to have no respect for national boundaries. They
Right.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah,
He's not
yeah,
going
but
to
he
go
will
to
need-
vacation.
But
Yeah.
but he will need to purchase a health care plan to come back to the United
That's
States.
right.
He
That's the
will.
problem.
He will.
Yeah, good.
Yes.
Well, this
For
has
us.
been great and delightful, and
Yes,
thank you so
thank
much,
you.
Rachel, for being a part of this. I really have enjoyed this, guy. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you for
this was
having
delightful.
me. Yeah, it's great.
All right, and Kevin, where can people find us?
PlaySavesTheWorld.com.
PlaySavesTheWorld.com or .org.
.org, that's what I said.
Yeah, we're just getting used to our new brand. Yes, PlaySavesTheWorld.org. And they can email us at playsavestheworld@gmail.com. And again, check out the Zeitgeist channel and ourkowert.com. Yep.
That's it.
All right.
Super Bueno, Kinder Buenos.
Kinder
Everything.
Bueno, everybody.
Kinder Bueno. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.